Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the webinar that Chayora is hosting with its partners Telstra and the British Chamber of Commerce in China. We're delighted to be talking this morning on the subject that China is open for business, very much open for business, and to talk about how we will assist people and how to access and trade with China in the course of the next 45 to 50 minutes. I'm delighted to be joined on this call by my two principal colleagues, Steven Lynch, the Managing Director of British Chamber of Commerce in China. He's based in Beijing, and we'll be hearing from Steven in a few moments' time. And also from Matt Williams, who's the Head of EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Telstra. Great to have Steven and Matt joining, and we'll hear from both a little bit later. But perhaps a few moments just in introduction terms. My name is Oliver Jones. I'm the Chief Executive of Chayora. And as Chayora, we are a business very focused on China. We're headquartered in Hong Kong, and we are an investor, developer, and operator of hyperscale data centers in China. And we'll show you a video of one of the major campuses that we're developing to serve the greater Beijing area a little bit later in the program. One of the features of being in China is that we've learned over the years that the scale of China is something that dwarfs any other business scale. I use the term China scale to be bigger than hyperscale in most cases. And as an illustration, the campus that we're developing will be one of the world's biggest data center campuses, based on a site of around 32 hectares, that's 80 acres, depending on where you come from in the world. And we'll be completing on development 8 major data centers on that site. As Chayora, will be investing around $1.5 billion in infrastructure. And data centers, as many of you will know, are one of the most expensive buildings in the world today per square meter to build. But they are critical to trade, and they're critical to modern transactions. We've all seen through the COVID challenges of this year our dependency on things such as Zoom, which is what we're sitting on today. But of course, we build and operate, as they say, where the cloud lives, where the servers are based, and the backbone of the modern business environment is the thing that data centers underpin. As Chayora, we're focused very much on enabling international businesses to do good business with China. And we felt, therefore, that with our collaboration and our partners in Telstra as one of the leading, and Matt will describe more about Telstra's credentials as Australia-based, but an international telecommunications business, and one of the most important international telcos in China today. The collaboration between Chayora and Telstra is particularly important to enable people to do good and efficient international business in China. So what I'd like to do is move us into the first part of our presentation. And can we just put up the, what we're going to cover in the agenda, if I can just talk people through that. Steven Lynch will be taking us through a state of the market and opportunities for British business. Steven and his colleagues have recently produced a terrific new facility and new report that we'll be getting the headlines of. Matt and I will then provide some reflections in terms of the headlines that come out of that presentation that Steven will have covered. And then after we show you a brief video of the Chayora facility that has just opened to serve the Beijing area, we'll then have a wider discussion between the three of us, and hopefully we'll be able to pick up on some of the questions that you may be able to present to us. And any questions that are fed through, we'll try and pick up on those in the back end of the presentation. So once again, a very, very warm welcome to Steven and to Matt. Thank you both for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And I'd like to pass over to Steven, and you'll take us through the state of the market and specifically the opportunities for British business. So welcome, Steven.
Well, thank you, Oliver. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present this report. And it's a very timely report because we actually brought this our sentiment survey out yesterday. So I think I'm really excited to present this, and it's quite interesting because the UK, for China, we were sort of the first into this virus, so the first to be using Zoom, and so we were also the first out, going back to in-person meetings and in-person events. So this is actually one of the first Zoom webinars I've done in months, So yeah, very pleased to be on the call. I'm just going to quickly share my screen and just kind of take everyone through a presentation around our sentiment survey. This is the third sentiment survey that the British Chamber of Commerce has done in China, and it pulses British businesses here in market. And I think I just want to emphasize that because there is nuances between businesses that are not in China and businesses that are in China. So quickly, just to take you through the methodology and some of the statistics when we talk about who we are pulsing, who we are speaking to. The sentiment survey represents over 250 British businesses here in China, with global revenue around 675 billion, but in market China revenue of 20 billion pounds sterling. It's genuinely representative of both the big companies and also the small companies. If we look at the statistics in front of us, actually the small and medium companies make up 59% of the cross-section of our data set. And as you can imagine, they are largely based in the major cities of Beijing and Shanghai. Shanghai slightly leading the pack with 39% of headquarters, but 36 in Beijing. And then you can see the representation of the other cities throughout the market. So generally, once again, to kind of truly represent that China market, that genuine China voice. And as you can see, British businesses have a footprint in every single province in China. When we look at the businesses that we pulsed, the largest section of our membership, or largest section of the British businesses, is made up of professional services, so financial and professional services. We then have the second majority, which is advanced manufacturing and transportation, and then education is our third biggest sector. So once again, to kind of size sector, every company has kind of been included in this, which is important to say. So without that, we move into 2020. It's obviously been an extremely turbulent year, and that has all been due to COVID-19. We've felt that domestically here in China, but obviously globally, and that's been an extremely challenging and turbulent year for all of our companies. So expectedly so, last year's the revenues from British businesses in market has gone down. It has decreased. It is 44% of our respondents have a lower income revenue this year, which is obviously disappointing, but also difficult and challenging due to that. And I think when we look at it, it's particularly been difficult for SMEs. As mentioned, some of our larger members have been slightly insulated by the buffer that they have financially, but SMEs have certainly felt the pinch the most, with 71% saying it's been a more difficult year. So that's certainly concerning when we look at the globe. As I mentioned, China's been first in, first out. We had a very short pandemic period. Now that's concerning for businesses throughout the world, that possibly that longevity of COVID might continue and be more difficult for small and medium businesses moving forward. As mentioned, the British Chamber of Commerce, we've actually been pulsing perceptions and sentiment around COVID-19 since its outbreak back in February. And as you can imagine, the impact has lessened kind of towards as the period has gone on. However, one of the biggest key issues for businesses is global business disruption, and you can't truly have global travel, global business if you can't travel. And so that's one of the biggest issues. Obviously, speaking to our colleagues back in the UK, that's one of the biggest problems. They can't get to China to do some of the business that needs to be done. So that is something that's causing the biggest issues here in market at the moment. But I think moving forward, and that's what we must do, we must look forward to the next year. We want to look at business optimism and where that sits within the China market. As you will see, optimism has dropped year on year, but it's 49%, and that's still broadly optimistic. And I think that's extremely positive given the challenging year that we've all had, specifically when we talk about COVID-19. So 49% of businesses are still broadly optimistic about the China market. As you can see, the uptick has come in the neutral area, where people are a bit more nuanced about their approach to China. But the positive is that only 7% of businesses are pessimistic. So the majority of businesses are still extremely optimistic about the China market. And I think that can be felt because the businesses that we pulsed, that we sentimented, that the majority, two-fifths of the majority use China as the #1 priority market globally. The #1 priority market in the world is China. And that's been followed by investment. That can be followed by actual financial investment. Again, when we must say that financial investment has dropped in regards to last year. Again, I think that's unsurprising given the year we've had. But 44% of all businesses surveyed have said they're going to be increasing their investment in 2021 in the China market, with 37% saying they're going to keep their investment the same. Only 7% are going to be decreasing investment. And I think that's an extremely positive message moving forward. What that actually means, that means that more jobs will be created, more opportunities will be created between the UK and the Chinese economy. 13 new jobs will be created per company when we talk about this. That's only one. Last year, when we asked the same question, it was 14 new jobs that would be created. So this year, it's only down by 1, which again, I think shows the strength of the China market. And I think, you know, where does that optimism come from? Where does that investment opportunities come from? It comes down to the actual potential of the China market. And when Oliver mentioned that this is a hyper market, this is really a hyper market. The size, the scale, the opportunities here are enormous. And 82% of our businesses have said that they will be doubling down on investment, and that's largely due to the market potential of China. However, it must be mentioned that there are still areas and barriers to growth. There are still regulatory challenges which are keeping the UK PLC from unleashing its full potential. So what are those challenges? As you can imagine, COVID-19 has dominated 2020. It will continue to dominate 2021. So the global economic uncertainty is one of the biggest issues for British businesses. Unfortunately, we've also seen a rise in UK-China tensions, while we're actually seeing a decrease in US-China tensions. So this is certainly something to keep an eye on around the protectionism and the tensions that are growing between China and the rest of the world. But what I mentioned around UK-China tensions, one of the biggest issues for businesses is uncertainty, and we can see that by the sentiment that we've pulsed. 39% of businesses say that the unpredictability of UK policy towards China is the biggest issue around investment. So one thing that we actively call for from the British Chamber is more clarity around our China strategy, more clarity from the government, but also that's huge opportunities for businesses, business-to-business engagement, which exactly like webinars and calls like today. So even though there is this growing tension, even though there is issues around COVID-19, around protectionism, 44% of businesses will be taking no action. More than half of the businesses will be taking no action. And actually, only 3% of businesses are even considering leaving the China market. And that, again, I think that comes back to our earlier points around market potential. One thing to mention is we do still have market access barriers. Certain industries are more restricted than others. We can see the overall sentiment of business is that 13% of businesses feel that they are significantly restricted, where 32% see somewhat restrictions, and that can be felt most notably in healthcare, in financial services, in IT and telecoms, with the most areas of sort of openness being creative in education, and we also see that in advanced manufacturing and transportation. Now, many of you might know that the foreign investment law came into place earlier this year, which is an extremely positive sign when we look at China and foreign investment into the country. This is specifically prevalent for the UK, given the state of our economy and given the areas around Brexit that I'm sure we'll talk about later. Unfortunately, not many companies have seen the tangible impacts of the foreign investment law, but I think we hope this is because the government, the Chinese government and the authorities have had such a strong focus on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So moving forward, we do expect a lot more liberalization of the market, a lot more openness and opportunities for British businesses to expand and to grow. So we look at the sort of the top regulatory challenges that remain for British businesses, and this is extremely important for Chayora when we talk about this. The #1 challenge is navigating cybersecurity and IT restrictions. In many cases, that's become worse for British businesses here in market. So it's extremely timely to be on this call to be able to discuss the issues that businesses face, but also the solutions to those challenges. So I suppose what we want to do is look forward. We can see that British businesses are investing more. They're continuing to double down on their operations here in China. And actually, surprisingly, the SMEs will be investing more. MNCs will be looking to put in around 1 to 10%, 25% of those businesses, but SMEs will actually be the larger growth market when we're talking around investment. And again, when we talk about these market access barriers, when we talk about cybersecurity, if these areas were to liberalize, if these areas were to open up, or if these areas were to be working with a partner that truly understood the market, businesses would follow by investing. And we can see that very, very clearly. 17% would put a significant increase significantly their spending, 35 will do somewhat. So again, when we understand these challenges fully and we know who to work with, the business, the money and the business will follow. And that's very, very clear from our latest sentiment survey. So I suppose the key takeaways, I think, for this is it is not all bad. There is certainly light at the end of the tunnel. The China market has huge potential that can be unlocked with working with a local partner, potential that can be unlocked with working with companies who truly know what to do, in this market. The most positive trends that I haven't spoken about is number one is technological innovation. Number two, the Chinese economic prospects, and number three, government stimulus. And I know Oliver will be able to speak a little bit further on that, but that's exactly what this organisation does. And again, I think the opportunities moving forward can be vast. So the three kind of key takeaways is China has gone through a very remarkably swift economic recovery. This remains a top priority for British businesses. Again, looking forward, the positivity around the foreign investment law. Fundamentally, this is a very, very good thing. This will increase investment and increase opportunities here in the market. Despite UK-China tensions growing, investment optimism is still broadly high. And this is a key market for British businesses. So I thank everyone for the time I've been allowed to present. And I'll stay around for questions. I think there's a lot to discuss when we talk about China, but at the end of the month, we will be going through Brexit. And one thing we do call for is China to be prioritized as a market of huge potential and huge opportunity. So with that, I will leave you and thank you very much.
Fabulous, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed for that. I think there's a lot that we'll want to pick over and explore in a few moments' time. And perhaps just segueing into giving the opportunity for us to hear from Matt in a moment. One of the things I think that's particularly important is just to remind ourselves of the scale. We're coming up to Brexit. The scale of China is truly enormous, and it's very easy to throw around numbers like 1.4 billion population. But just for everybody listening, one of the key elements here is that if you take 1.4 billion and think about it a different way, that's the same as the population of all of North America, plus all of the countries of the European Union, including the UK for the moment, plus all of the former countries in the USSR, plus 10%. Now think about that as a market size. Now what I think is really important for British and European businesses, but British businesses particularly, is to be able to connect up with Stephen and his colleagues in the British Chambers of Commerce. China is a challenging market in which to work. I've been working in and out of China for some 30 years now, and each time I go into China, I come back, amazed at something new. And the more you go to China, the more you learn, I think. But let me introduce our other guest and colleague on this presentation, and that's Matt Williams, as I mentioned before, Head of Europe, Middle East, Africa for Telstra. Matt, just perhaps building on the comments that Stephen's just made, why don't we hear from you a little bit about Telstra and perhaps what you see as some of the biggest challenges that foreign companies face today when they're connecting into China? Because we all know about the national firewall and the like, but how do you get over that one, perhaps for people who are online? Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Oliver, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me in this opportunity to talk to you about Telstra and our experiences in China. So my job is to run Telstra in Europe, and if you know Telstra, then we are the domestic incumbent telco in Australia, and so we've grown out beyond our domestic borders through the Asia Pacific region. And we have extensive infrastructure there, so we have by far the largest subsea footprint through Asia Pacific. and we are the first Sino-foreign carrier or operator in China. So we have 50 points of presence in some 39 cities across the region, with several data centers, and of course our partnership with Chayora in the mainland there, and our headquarters is also in Hong Kong. And so my role is to facilitate the communications requirements for Western European businesses into the Asia Pacific region. And so China is absolutely our key differentiator. We see it as a phenomenal marketplace. I don't need to come out with any more superlatives around the potential there and the size of the market. And so something that was also mentioned was that there are certain barriers to entry into the Chinese market, which is a challenge. And we know that very, very well, because technology and telecommunications was one of the most heavily regulated sectors in the marketplace. And so we've been operating there for over 30 years and have some considerable experience in that marketplace, and have hopefully been able to navigate some of those challenges for our customers. So what do we see as the biggest challenges there? Well, obviously we've spoken about the macro trends and the current political turbulence, which I guess is cyclical, and whatever the status there, what is absolutely clear is that the Chinese market is complex. And whether turbulent times at a macro level or not, the markets are different. And to be successful over time requires a local presence, local relationships, local skills in terms of navigating the complex regulatory environment, and a level of adaptability, I would say. So moving through to regulation, and of course there are very strict regulations around the China Internet Security Law, which requires, for example, specific information to be kept in data centers located in China, and can in turn have an impact on how your applications are served or performed, or users experience application performance within China. And so requires quite a specific technological viewpoint addressing those challenges in the mainland. And I think also around licensing and regulation, irrespective of the kind of national environment, there is also provincial law as well, which you need to take a look at. So you require a different lens every time you look at a new provincial investment in China. Then other infrastructure challenges are related to technology, I would say, because you've got to communicate with the rest of your business, right? And looking at the geological environment around China, that's also very challenging, as is a lot of APAC. So the seas, for example, around China are very rough, prone to national disasters. You've got maritime disputes, and you've got a booming Chinese shipping industry, which does actually cause damage to cable infrastructure as well. And that's a big problem. And so you do see a high amount of cable damage in the region. And so we have a great deal of skill and process and infrastructure in order to handle that. Then lastly, I would say people and skills is a big challenge. One, because obviously, irrespective of the new laws that are coming through, the foreign investment law, China's business is still very much done based on relationships. And so you need absolutely local people with strong relationships with many stakeholders. But then you need to balance that as well with people from within your business, maybe executives from with internal skills who want to drive the culture and drive the local presence there, and keep that Chinese branch aligned with the rest of the business. So that's also a challenge that we found.
Okay, hey Matt, that's great as an initial introduction on that front, and I think one of the key features that many don't understand when first looking at China is that, of course, we can set up a business, for example, in London, stick a server under the desk, and start selling to people in Mexico, in Brazil, in many parts of Africa. But you can't do that effectively to sell into China. You have to, as you rightly pointed out, you have to be able to be within the national firewall to be effective. and very importantly, understand the complexities of the national telecommunications regulations and their application in the different provinces, as you've mentioned. And that, I think, is kind of where we come in. And what I'll suggest is perhaps at this stage, before we broaden it up, because I think you've picked up some points, Matt, that I'd like to start exploring collectively with Stephen in a moment. But why don't we just take a moment to show people the type of infrastructure that's getting put together. And before we run the video in a couple of minutes' time, just to mention that the ability to satisfy the requirements of the world's most demanding cloud service players, people like Microsoft, like Google, like Alibaba, like Tencent, Huawei, and others. The demands of these organizations have changed dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years, as we've seen a shift from people having enterprise data centers to cloud and public hybrid cloud environments. Being able to work in that space, as I know Telstra and Chayora both do, is vitally important to be able to keep on top of technology development, but also ensure, particularly when you're combining with what Stephen was talking about and what you've just touched on there, Matt, is the importance of being able to give international businesses the assurance that when they go into China, not only will they have to deal with the complexities of regulation and all of the different facets that you've mentioned, but actually we can remove some of those concerns by delivering a world-class standard of data center and telecommunications environment. Because if we can ensure that that technology is a reference point, we can then work effectively to enable them to do good business through the much more complex areas of commerce and the areas that the British Chamber will always be out there to assist with. So on that, perhaps let's just run the video that will give you a bit of an indication of the first building on the large campus that Chayora has just opened outside Beijing. So let's run the video now, please. Thanks very much for running that video. I think just to place that one in context, as Chayora, we're super proud to have got to this stage. It's incredibly complicated undertaking complex development and construction for a facility such as a data center. To give you a bit of a context, that first facility there can accommodate around 1,000 racks. Out of the 25,000 racks of data center capacity that we are building. And you saw on the final images there, the phase 2 that is under construction now and the wider expansion space. Again, to place that in context for those less familiar with data centers, 25,000 racks typically can accommodate around 500,000, 500,000 servers. What we have a facility there to be able to do is provide capacity for the largest global cloud players who may in themselves want 5 or 10,000 racks of capacity, right the way through to the other end where we're working super closely with Telstra in respect to the co-location services. So for organizations out there that want 1 rack or 5 racks or 50 or 100 racks, being able to have that in an environment which has the Telstra connectivity through a cloud neutrality, in a cloud neutral and carrier neutral environment, but also an environment that can be as familiar to anybody as a data center back in the UK or elsewhere on their patch is a really important feature of that. So we're very keen that people are aware of what we're doing there and encourage the communication through British Chamber of Commerce with ourselves and with Telstra to see how we can do good business together. So let me just perhaps take us down that road and to bring in Steven and Matt on this one. Matt, we just heard from you there talking in terms of the biggest challenges that foreign companies face today, but maybe I'll come to Steven here because let's look at it the other way around. What do you think are the biggest mistakes that foreign companies make when they're trying to enter the China market? I'd be keen to get your view and then Matt, come to you on that same question. What's your thoughts on that, Steven?
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier. I think it's the naivety. Even though the market has so much potential, it's an extremely competitive and sophisticated market. You need the right partners to go into the market. You need the market insight. You can't just open an office and hope for the best because there's 1.4 billion people. You know, China has moved from a manufacturing base to a heavily technological economy, and so I think it's one of those things. You know. Someone told me a long time ago, you wouldn't just, if you didn't speak a word of English, you didn't have a network, you didn't have any, a real strong USP, you wouldn't just open up an office in London. And so that's the exact same in China. Yeah. You need to work with the right partners. You need to understand, do your due diligence to come into the market, find the right partners to work with. And once you do, there is huge potential, huge opportunity, but it must be, done in a systematic way.
And just on that, before I go to Matt on there, so I mean, tell us a little bit. The British Chamber, of course, like many chambers of commerce for around the world, is all about helping people share knowledge and tapping into expertise. So, say a little bit more about that, because that is so worrying to people. What you've just described, it's this alien environment, and particularly so in China.
Yeah, thank you, and I think that's kind of the role of the chamber. We want to educate, help, and support British businesses thrive here. So whether that be through advocacy and lobbying to improve the business environment that I spoke about earlier, some of the regulatory challenges, or educate and support British businesses that are looking at the China market. I think we need an honest and robust conversation on China, but objective. Some companies are not in the right state to enter, but some companies absolutely are. They just need to work with the right partners, and that's kind of the role of the chamber, is to really connect people with organizations exactly like yourself that have these incredible data centers. And this is the biggest issue for British businesses. So it's understanding that, navigating that, and putting people in contact with the right people.
Great. Thanks, Steven. Steven, and Matt, what's your thoughts on the biggest mistakes that foreign companies make? And obviously as a UK national, you can give that perspective, but give us an Australian spin on this one as well. Why not?
Well, we see that I think for any business looking to invest in China, then you should be taking a long-term perspective. And so, as I said before, I mean the current political turbulence will hopefully be long forgotten in 5 to 10 years. And so, really, we should be looking at that sort of horizon. I think to Steven's point around partners, then in some situations, you have to enter the market, you have to have a partnership with a local company, and they will give you that market intelligence, access to customer base, suppliers, and hopefully some government relationships as well, which are absolutely crucial in terms of navigating that complex legal and regulatory environment. So a good example for us is that we have to outrun 6 different licenses in the marketplace, and to do that, we absolutely have all stakeholders covered properly. I think if you don't have the right relationships, then that can really hold you back. And so businesses that are well positioned for success there usually have those very strong relationships with the government, with employees, customers, and Chinese society, as well as a balance, as I said before, of people from within the business as well to bring that flavour of the company.
I think you're absolutely right. Sorry, just to interject on that one, I think just to pick up there, I think what often people don't see, I think, when going into China for the first time, is they apply a filter or a lens to it, which is of their own making and of their own background. The interwoven nature of the public and the private sector in China, you've just touched on there with government, is hugely important, because often people see government as being a blocker. In China, government is very, very much an enabler if you work in the right way. And, sorry to interject where you were coming from there, but I just think it's a massively important point that people need to think about. Do carry on.
Absolutely, complete prerequisite. I mentioned recruitment before too, and that's absolutely essential, and that can be quite difficult and take time as well. And we've seen skill shortages in our sector, but to get that balance of experienced people with a good list of contacts, which is essential, because culturally the Chinese, their lives are based around the relationships they keep and the loyalty they have to their friends and contacts and associates, and so that's incredibly important too.
Yeah, I think again, building on that, one of the things that we've seen is that very important for bringing international businesses in, that they can engage on the corporate social responsibility side, engage with the community, and very importantly, hire and develop high quality local talent. One of the good examples was I was in a conversation with the first leader of the city of Tianjin, where we are based, and raising comments about he's been very interested in the development that we've been putting together. It's a key part of the city strategy to attract inward investment. And when I raised the question of, how can we help develop relationships in terms of hiring smart young graduates, he immediately picked up the phone, and within 2 hours, we jumped in a car and were meeting the dean of the local university. We then put in place a graduate and an internship relationship. I just think that's magnificent when you get that kind of reaction, because it's, instead of where I've worked in many other countries around the world, where the reaction is, well, fill in a form, send it in, and we'll put it on a pile, or whatever it may be. That's rather disparaging, I'm afraid, to some people in governments around the world. Actually, the can-do and the ability to actually make things happen is remarkable, that I've seen on the ground across there. But let's perhaps broaden the question around that, because we hear a lot of concerns about people going into China saying that, for example, how do I protect my interests across there? And I think one of the areas that is often raised quite quickly is intellectual property and the like. Perhaps I can get each of your respective views in terms of, should people be worried about that? Is China really as kind of devastatingly challenging as sometimes portrayed? Steven, what's the position of BritishCham in terms of helping people get their heads around the IP issues?
Sure. So I mean, I'll just quickly go back and quote our sentiment survey. And I think it's very important, and that's the nuance around being in market and outside of market and perceptions. So the first year we ran our sentiment survey, IP was the biggest challenging issue for British businesses. The second year, it dropped right out of the top 10. And this year, again, it hasn't moved back into the top 10. The regulatory environment has changed around IP. It's got a lot better for foreign businesses, and understanding that market while you're in the market is very, very critical. Now, in saying that, it's still starting from a low base. It is still absolutely a concern of businesses. But China is not standing still on that. They are absolutely trying to improve the environment. So again, it comes back to being in market, understanding, working with the right partners, and actually doing your due diligence like you would do in any other market around protecting your IP. So absolutely, it's still a concern, but it's improving, it's getting better. And again, kind of, I imagine it's probably one of the biggest issues if you're outside the market. But currently here in China, things are improving.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. Matt, your views, anything to build on that?
I'm no IP expert. I think that Stephen really has probably captured it there. From our perspective, in terms of cybersecurity and protecting the data that exists on the infrastructure that we sell, then of course that's a board level consideration, but in every enterprise in every country. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, nothing really extra to add.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is that with the particularly some of the big cloud players, the international cloud players, what tends to happen is that the reticence to place the most recent or latest update of the platform software into China sometimes means that there's a lag of maybe 6 or 12 months in some cases, and I think that's almost building in a little bit of capacity. But I think and where we've had detailed conversations with some of the senior executives on the west coast of the US, the view is that, look, you can't ignore China. China is just around 20% of the world's online population today. 900, I think I saw the statistic a little earlier today, 904 million people are online today. And that means because there's 1.4 billion, as I mentioned before, that's going to be growing by probably around the population of the United Kingdom each year, people going online for the first time. Imagine an extra 60 million people a year in your prime market, and finding a way, exactly as you say, Matt, of a practical approach of controlling that and applying good due diligence going in is key on the IP front. But let's come back here. One of the things we both touched on was on the partners in China. How do you know whether you've got a good relationship in China? This is partly a cultural thing and partly a business thing, because what are the signs, what are the signals perhaps that you would guide people? Stephen, perhaps coming to you first. You get good partners and bad partners all over the world. Joint ventures work, they fail. How do you know when you're going in the right direction, particularly in China? Are there any guidance points that you can give us?
I suppose that there's many elements to this, and there's many different that you, as Matt mentioned, you're actually in certain aspects, in certain industries, you are forced into joint ventures. So you must choose a local partner. Again, I think it just comes back down to due diligence, really understanding who you're working with. Often China is considered one of the biggest issues. I think around people think the differences between the UK and China is language, but it's not. It's culture. China has a very, very different culture to the UK. The UK has a different culture to China. That doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it different. And I think a huge part of that is understanding the culture. And it doesn't just come with one meeting. Possibly in the rest of the world, in the UK, business is quite transactional. In China, as you've mentioned, it's very, very much around relationships. You put a huge investment into Tianjin. That means you can get on the local phone to the mayor, and things can kind of move a little bit there. But that's again, that you mentioned you came to China 40 times last year. It's about investment into the market, investment into your local partners. So there's no one size fits all in regards to finding the right partner. Huge amounts of due diligence must be done. But again, relationships, that's so critical.
It is absolutely agreed. And Matt, do you any comments on that from your perspective? Well, what about the because of course Telstra's got some great local partners in China. Tell us about those, or any lessons you might learn from that.
Well, I think just to build on that, imagine that our licenses have to be renewed every year. So I mentioned adaptability, and I think it's a question of being ready, willing, and able to work with the authorities, understand any changes that we may need to adapt to, and help to implement those changes. And that's essential, really, to remain as a viable provider in that country. And so without our partner, which is Telstra PBS, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so you have to operate locally and work with those local partners, and they can help you to build a successful business. And through like 30 years of operating there, we know that we're doing well. We see a very, very fast growth rate. It's above 20% per year at the moment. And we have lots of customers from the Fortune 500 list and the Chinese economy alike. And so, our value proposition is endorsed by them.
And I was going to say on that, I mean, part of your presence in China over that period of time, it's always interesting when you start to genuinely compete with the major China telcos for the domestic customers. And how have you found that? I mean, the extent to which domestic customers choose Telstra as opposed to China Unicom or China Telecom, etc. Because that's always a big bridge, that getting international companies to actually go domestic as opposed to serving international, which I think you do very extensively.
Yeah, we tend to operate with the biggest Chinese companies who are international in their own right, and so in turn require our services beyond the Chinese border as well. I would say otherwise, we take Western European or American or other Asian companies into China. And so I think typically, given that success requires a long-term view, we do have some very large customers, very large organizations who are our customers in China.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think that's certainly what we've observed. It's less about I would say the Chinese SME marketplace, because the local Chinese operators have huge scale. They can compete on price, and our value proposition is much more around that holistic view to delivering and fulfilling a presence and an operating capability in China. So it probably does suit international businesses much more.
Definitely. I think Stephen, what about this side? Because of course, many of your member organisations will be, very much B2C type customers and B to domestic B. What about the guidance or help that you can provide in terms of accessing that market? Because it's one thing working with the internationals going into China, which is the B2B proposition that both Telstra and ourselves tend to focus on. But actually, for many people, getting into the market, into that body base of the 1.4 billion is what it's all about. What's the guidance of BritishCham on that?
I think it's just connectivity. So our members have been in market for 40 years since the opening up and reform. So it's just making sure that we work with the right people. Our members, if it's for example, if it's listing your products on, JD or some of the online platforms to sell goods, it's just making sure that we can connect, new businesses or, businesses looking at the market with the right people. And again, British businesses have been operating in market for the best part of 40 years. So again, it's just around that connectivity and making sure we can do our due diligence to promote our members ultimately.
Okay. And look, a great question that's just come in, if I can slot this one in. John Laban, who's one of the attendees here. Thanks, John, for your question. Just to share that with others. John commented that the Chinese are turning now to open source software and open source hardware projects to try to break their reliance on US suppliers. And we've been reading a lot about that in the press. The EU doing the same as China to break the dominance of US suppliers. What's the UK government's position on this? And from a British Chamber of Commerce position, does the UK government have a strategy to focus on open source tech in the way that the EU has done? I believe John's mentioned that the French introduced open source tech policies back about 6-7 years ago in 2014. Any perspective on that one, Stephen?
I suppose on this one, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, so I'm not too sure on the tech side of things. But I mean, just on a wider point in regards to UK government strategy towards China, I think it needs a clearer strategy. I don't think we have a very clear strategy. I think, unfortunately, sentiment on China has sort of moved from indifference to sort of outright hostility without much objectivity or actually facts. So I think when I talk about the UK-China relationship, I would like to see a clearer strategy from the UK government. And I think there's different elements to that. There's the people to people, there's the education side of things, there's the business to business, and again, the government to government. And I think a clearer strategy from both the UK and China would certainly help UK PLC. But maybe Matt has more thoughts on that one.
Any comments, Matt, on the open source position?
I think this is more of a generic answer, because technology is changing so much for enterprises, and there are so many opportunities driven by mobility and big data and cloud and all of the fantastic AI, 5G, all of this stuff. Bring it all together, and you can deliver compelling solutions, and you can learn more about your customers, deliver amazing digital experiences, and that essentially is the secret sauce for competitive advantage for all enterprises into the future. And so I think open source is critical to embracing innovation and being able to adapt quickly and drive new technology into the market. And I believe that is applicable to every country. But I can see that there would be complexity if there's concerns around intellectual property in China. But I also see that there's a need potentially to view China separately because of those specific technological guardrails that exist in that country. And so that's my point of view. Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be learned in that area from some of the things that China's done. And I think John raises a really interesting point. An example I would sort of relate to is that Baidu has been one of the principal innovators and investors in the research and development of driverless cars, autonomous vehicles, for example. And in order to move from a great idea to being an industrialized consequence of that, what Baidu did was, having spent years developing huge amounts of data relating to how driverless cars and autonomous vehicle work, they threw open their doors in respect of making all the data from their research available to every other autonomous vehicle developer in China. And that's extraordinary, because that actually, as John suggests in his question, that suddenly enables you to sort of leverage this knowledge at a national level as opposed to just at a corporate level. And I think that comes back to the, if you like, the way in which China very impressively creates a single party state interwoven with extreme capitalism and making it all work in a very exciting way as well. But this is a really element there. Again, John's made the point there that Tesla, of course, open sourced its patents, because if you can get the platform into everything, then you can leap forward. And we've seen that with Linux in the past and other open source software. But I think it's fascinating. I think we would be able to talk extensively about a whole series of areas on this. I am conscious, though, of the time, of course, and we're coming up to the end of the session at 5 to the hour. But we've covered a number of different areas. Let me just recap. Firstly, great thanks to Steven Lynch, who's the MD of the British Chamber of Commerce in China. Very valuable, and thank you, Steven, for your presentation on that front. Can we mail out a copy of your report to everybody who's on here? Anyone who's registered, I think, would be great for them to see that. And please get in touch with Steven in terms of, if you're going to China, if you're not familiar with it, Steven and his colleagues, and indeed Matt and ourselves will all make you very, very welcome and help you to do good business across there. Thank you also to our partners in data center co-location services, Telstra and Matt Williams specifically. Matt, really appreciate your input. And, I know that if people have got questions, if they can follow through with you on the connectivity and the others, you'd be delighted, I'm sure, with the Telstra pool of knowledge, the deep expertise that your organization's got to assist people in understanding what's taking place out there and working together. And lastly, from our own side as Chayora, we really appreciate people engaging in a seminar like this. We love working with other businesses that want to make a difference in China. And if we in some small way can help you establish your platform and make your next billion, for those of you who are looking to do that, China's a great place to try and do it. The platform and the data center infrastructure that we can provide would be great. And our senior leader, our executive vice president for EMEA, Chris Miller, is based in the UK. We'll be delighted to meet up with anybody along with Matt who would be interested in talking further. So we bring ourselves to 5 to the hour. Thank you very much to Matt, to Steven once again. Thank you everybody else for coming online. And with that, I'll draw this to a close. We hope that we'll hear from you, and we look forward to speaking again. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great morning.
Thank you.